Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It's January the 18th, and it is National Winnie the Pooh Day. Yeah, that's real. I typed in January 18th, and that's what came up. It's Winnie the Pooh Day, I guess celebrating the birth or the creation of the lovable bear, Winnie the Pooh. I actually like Winnie the Pooh with Pano night visions on and like an AR-15. I've seen a couple memes like that. Winnie the Pooh maybe making a comeback. Today, we're going to be talking about a little things that may be familiar. COVID vaccine mandates, malfeasance of our senior officers, mistreating those who are in the uniform. And we're going to be talking to John Frankman. You guys are going to really enjoy this. Super interesting guy. And also a man who put his faith up front. And it turns out that just like so many others, like many of you, it was non-negotiable. I talked the other day about how this country is a Christian nation at heart. You can be another faith. But the Christian nation up front piece seems to be lacking, except when it comes up against that hard wall of people who are not willing to compromise. So we'll talk about some folks that are not willing to compromise, people that jumped in and started supporting us right away. Today's podcast is sponsored by Patriot Coolers. Here's mine. Yeah. This is the 19-ounce in black. I like it has ghost letters on the handles. It says Patriot right on the bottom. And if you go to the flip over and as you're cleaning it, you'll always see there are 50 stars, 50 bright spots, 50 laboratories for freedom if we live in the federalist system that we are supposed to. Check out patriotcoolers.com. Again, patriotcoolers.com. You can find them on social media at Patriot Coolers. They're both on X and on True Social, the two places I am most prominent. I know they're also on Instagram, but I hate Instagram, just like I hate all Meta products. Check out Patriot Coolers. Use promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E. Promo code Kyle will save you 10%. And you guys can get into any number of their outstanding products that say Patriot right on the front. That's their name, that's their brand, and you are their market. Patriots who love this country. We're going to be talking to a Patriot, so you guys can look forward to that. Again, promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E, saves you 10%. And if you spend $50 or more, you're going to get free shipping. Easy day, easy stuff. Let's do one more up front before we get started. How about my friends at Catholic Vote? I'm going to be hanging out with them today. CatholicVote.org. You guys know how to get there. Go to CatholicVote.org, www.CatholicVote.org. It's going to land you right here on this page, which shows you all kinds of things like someone praying the rosary, someone who loves babies and is getting an ultrasound, some fireworks for American freedom. They are America's top Catholic advocacy group. They are advocating and in the fight for faith, family, and freedom. You can get the Loop, which is a great email service. You don't have to be Catholic. It doesn't even try to preach at you. All it's saying is, hey, do you want to know what's going on in this world? If you don't know, you're going to be misinformed. And if you're not informed, you're going to make bad decisions, including at the ballot box, CatholicVote.org, out there as a nonprofit supporting the Kyle Seraphin Show. We really appreciate them. So you guys can support them as well. All right. Without any further ado, let's have a really cool conversation. A really neat guy. He looks kind of big, though. What do you think? Let's talk to John Frankman. He is a former Green Beret. He is a former seminarian. He could have been Catholic of the Year in 2023 if people knew. Could have been in the running with me and Mark Halp. I think we're going to have a fun chat. We're going to talk about COVID. We're going to talk about the Army. talk about trannies probably. We're going to get into it. Let's get real started right now. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, Kyle.
All right. So eventually we're going to tell people about this new military declaration for accountability, which you are one of the signatories to. I just want to tease that out there up front, but let's get started with who you are as a person. We can already see from the photos behind you, and maybe I teased it out to the audience. Tell me where you grew up, where you're from. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I was born in Los Angeles, California, and moved around a good bit. And parents unfortunately split up when I was 6, like many people, divorced at 9. And I ended up just moving around a ton. So a different school every year since about, maybe 3rd grade or something like that. And was raised generally Protestant. My mom was raised Catholic, left the church when she was a teen. And dad was pretty faithful, took me to church on a weekly basis. So at the age of 12, I lived with him in California. He took me to a Presbyterian church weekly and ended up just wanting to make that more a part of my life. So when I went back to live with my mom, Catholic church nearby, so was able to start going to mass. I was also transferred to a Catholic high school because my mom did not like the public school I was going into, maybe not doing the best in school, things like that. So started going to the Catholic school, loved everything the religion teacher was teaching, going to mass. And even though I was just Episcopal right before, or going to an Episcopalian church, there was some spiritual element to the Catholic faith that I had not experienced anywhere else. And it was especially powerful looking back because that church had plenty of liturgical abuse. So for those who aren't Catholic, that means that the priest isn't doing what he should be doing in the liturgy. There's a certain reverence that you're supposed to give to God. So when Catholics come to mass, the purpose of it is to there's like 4 ends, but it's to adore God, to give him thanksgiving, to ask for atonement for your sins, and then ask for petitions. But the glorifying God part can be diminished with some of this liturgical abuse when priests aren't doing what we believe was the mass liturgy handed on from Jesus Christ and passed on to the apostles. So even though I went through that with the priest leaving, the priesthood eventually, there was just that spiritual element. So I became Catholic, and I soon started thinking about the priesthood after, when a priest at high school came and said, I was a student here, so maybe one day one of y'all will be a priest like me. And then it was just classic Ignatian kind of discernment. St. Ignatius of Loyola, fantastic saint. Just did an 8-day Ignatian retreat, which is fantastic. But he said that God leads you through peace, through joy, consolation. The devil leads you through just fear, anxiety. So just me being 15, hearing about that, the peace about bringing God to people, people to God, and just making that part of your life and identity. But then as a 15-year-old boy thinking, man, I'll never get married. Other things 15-year-olds are thinking about. So, not going to do that either.
Yeah, it's a tough burden to throw on, though, too, as a 15-year-old.
Sure. Yeah. And just never being Catholic and just thinking that was the automatic thing and that I want to get married so bad. But hey, I'm still single at 35, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so I ended up becoming Catholic and not really understanding the Catholic faith super well because the RCIA program, which is Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults, that's the program that Catholics do in order to become Catholic, wasn't the most solid, like many of them, unfortunately, in the church today. So ended up I knew I wanted to go in the military as early as high school. I wanted to use the gifts God gave me in order to serve the greater good. And I thought with just kind of physical capabilities, leadership capabilities, love of country, willingness to do dangerous things, leadership, that was kind of the route I wanted to explore. And 9/11 happened. I was living in Alexandria, Virginia. My stepdad, he was stationed at Fort Belvoir. So it was very personal to me. And it was extremely scary to see that smoke coming from the Pentagon and just to get on to Fort Belvoir right after. I mean, it was extremely real, very intense. So at any rate, ended up going through Wheaton College, did ROTC, studied chemical physics, and it's a Protestant evangelical school. So it was really good for me to defend my faith, to have to read Scott Hahn books, Patrick Madrid books to kind of defend. And through that, love the church more, and that kind of desire or thought of the priesthood continued to develop. So commissioned in the Army in 2011 and put in for the chaplain candidate program. So went to seminary for 4 years, a fantastic experience that was with the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., with the understanding that I would join the military to serve as a chaplain. So priesthood is first, that's your big vocation, what God calls you to, where he puts you within his mystical body to serve him. And just through that whole experience is fantastic. You're growing in prayer, you're studying philosophy for 2 years, studied theology for 2 years, recently finished up my theological studies and got my master's in December in systematic theology. But it was just a fantastic experience. But at the end of the day, through just kind of prayer, discernment, doing a great. So a lot of people have heard of the Exodus 90 program. Maybe some people who are not necessarily Catholic wouldn't have heard of it, but it's a 90-day period of prayer and fasting. And it was started by Father Brian Dorr, who was a vice rector of the seminary at the time. So I was very blessed to do that program with him before it just exploded and it was an app for everybody, because he was in the seminary. And when I told him, hey, I'm not sure what I'm doing, brought me in, had me do that. And it was just a very peaceful, joyful kind of experience discerning out. And I found out Easter Monday that I was branched active duty infantry. And I thought I was going to get stuck in reserves or something like that. I had even thought, oh man, I'm 27. I'm so old. How am I going to, get through Ranger school, things like that. But I obviously did that. And then the Q course, but saw it as God loves me. He's blessing me, but he wants to challenge me. So ended up going through, got branched infantry. So IBOLIC, Ranger school. Ranger school definitely took a bit longer. So usually it's 2 months, and I guess I'll get into the training a little bit. So,
because I got a question here. You're in seminary, you've decided, and then you've done this retreat, and then you've got orders to go infantry as not a priest. Is that right?
So I did the retreat actually this last summer. So I got out of the Army July 1st, and I did an 8-day silent Ignatian retreat, just kind of furthering my love for Ignatius. But it was just kind of doing this prayer throughout the seminary, and a lot. So Catholic seminary, it's not just you go into class. You're living there, you're praying. I think we added it up. It's like 3 hours a day, because you're praying the Psalms, you're praying the Liturgy of the Hours, might be an hour of your day. You're going to mass, half hour, 45 minutes. You're praying the rosary. You're doing a holy hour, which is mental prayer, which is you talking to God, God talking to you, reading spiritual books. So it is just an atmosphere to just soak up and understand and know God personally. And that is so key right now to the problems that we're facing. I mean, our politicians aren't going to fix this. We might not even be supposed to fix it, It might just be God allowing this in order to purify us, because the spiritual order is more important. So we're supposed to fight. We're supposed to be faithful. And it's kind of in discernment, in prayer, understanding what is God's will for you specifically. How does he want you to integrate yourself into society, starting at the lowest level, individually, family, and beyond. But what does he want you to do? So yeah, kind of getting back to your point. So I discerned out, and when I knew I was going to leave the seminary, I had to let the Army know that, hey, I need to pay back my ROTC scholarship. I'm not going to be a priest, so you have to put me into a different branch. And those were the Obama years, so I thought I was going to get reserves or something stupid. I had actually put infantry, armor, and ordnance as my top 3 choices, thinking, okay, if I get ordnance, let's just try EOD or something like that. So just thinking combat arms. And even though I tried to switch it to armor because I was a little nervous about Ranger school, still got infantry, so saw it as God still wanting to challenge me. So got out of the seminary in the spring of 2015, and then started my Army career in the fall.
Got it. All right. Let me have you kind of give my audience a real reflection on this sort of concept. Combat arms, seminary, and priesthood. Where's the overlap in there? Because I think there is one. I think there's a lot, but I'm curious what you saw and how you saw those two as being maybe, different sides of the same coin, or how you saw it.
Yeah. Ultimately, you're trying to glorify God. And that's kind of the ultimate end in this world, is the glorification of God and the salvation of souls. And you're moving towards a certain purpose. And it's a different fraternity, but they're both very strong fraternities. The fraternity of seminarians, where you're with a bunch of dudes who are planning on being celibate too, and you're hanging out. And, when you're willing to give that up, if you're just a normal red-blooded American or man, that's a lot to give up, to decide you're not going to have a family or to discern that. So you bond extremely tight, and having that worldview, that Catholic worldview so tight, really helps you focus and go to a certain purpose. And you are enduring hardship and suffering. So I think that there's challenges, and there's definitely an accepting of the cross. I think I told some guys in Ranger school about some of the sacrifices I made in seminary or during Exodus 90, and they said, oh, Ranger school will be nothing, or, a little joke about that. That's totally not the case. I think I was actually in Ranger school, and I was thinking, man, there's way worse things than celibacy. Holy cow.
Starvation, right?
But yeah, I think the fraternity, that you're working for a certain purpose, that you are sacrificing of yourself, and you're using a lot of different gifts. You have to have a lot of kind of those soft skills. So there's definitely technical skills that you have to have. I think for infantry, even though they're there, a lot of them are boiled down more towards a common sense, kind of active communication, getting along with people. Similar, I think, with the priesthood, you have to have that. Certainly, it's different technical skills, but the soft skills that you have carry over extremely well.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so you end up getting infantry, and did you have a path? Did you have a special forces contract that was part of that, or they just said you're going to the infantry, and then we'll see what happens?
I was told regular Army infantry, and then I worked it out with them what duty station I had, so I was able to get Fort Carson. But I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, forever Fort Benning. Forget what changing names for racist generals. Sorry, you're making me want to be more. Just kidding.
I don't even know that I know that it changed only because you told me again, but I forget, and it'll always be Fort Benning.
Yeah, for sure. But at any rate, went to Fort Benning, did 16-week infantry basic officer leadership course. And for those who aren't familiar with the concept of the infantry, that's where you're planning to, that's what you think of when you think of the military. That's just the ground force within 300 meters. That's what you have to employ in order to occupy land, to destroy, close with, and destroy the enemy. So your beginning job as an infantry officer is being a platoon leader, and you can be MTO'd or given up to 40 soldiers underneath you. So you're thinking a lot of these young 22 dudes get through college, boom, there's your infantry platoon. So you kind of work up the maneuver. So you do kind of like your basic skills of rifle marksmanship, your individual skills, moving up to like team live fire exercises, squad, platoon, and then you're doing more kind of complex exercises, maybe in getting in as well armor assets or things, something like that. So kind of combined arms kind of thing. So that was a good school, very interesting. And then Ranger School is just school of hard knocks, where it's just repetitions, and you don't sleep much, you don't eat much. There's 3 different phases, and I'll eat some humble pie and say there's some things that I was not good at that I needed to improve on and learn from. So it's 2 months if you don't recycle. A lot of people recycle. But most people don't take 5 months, but it took me 5 months. I got through Benning phase, fine, mountain phase. I was injured halfway through. It was just like 4 or 5 days in. My legs, maybe if they're like this big, were swollen, maybe like an inch or 2 larger. And I was diagnosed with stress fractures in both my shins. Told I could try to finish up. So I wanted to try to finish up to see if I could at least recycle into the next phase. Didn't get a go. Most of the platoon didn't get a go. You pass or fail together as a platoon. The guys have to gel well together. And if it's your first phase through, you might just get 2 looks to get a go. If you're a recycle, they'll try to front load you, give you the easier options to kind of get ahead. I mean, I had an easy option when I got done with, when I went into the mountain phase, they gave me platoon leader planning, which is great. Everybody's a little more fresh. Awesome. But at any rate, it was a great experience. And let's say you had 26 days of patrolling. If you made it right through, well, I had 46 days of patrolling, and that's, you learn it. You just absorb it. It's fantastic. So as much as it sucks, it is a good school where you really learn a lot about yourself, what you can do. I mean, it's maybe 2 hours of sleep a night, and you're having like 2 meals a day, 2 MREs a day. And in some phases it's the MRE, sleep, and an MRE. You got to imagine if your stomachs are shrinking that much, it's hard to fill yourself up, but then you're just so hungry after. And we joke that was a pleasure sandwich. And as far as like the difficulty of military training, if you don't understand what it's like to like sweat ammonia because you're burning muscle, because you just don't have anything left, or to fall asleep while walking, I mean, you haven't physically pushed yourself. And that's just something that I think every single person experienced in Ranger School at some point in time. So yeah, Ranger School, Airborne School, yeah.
I've done a little bit of that. I've done the rhabdo.
Wow.
I have no love for it, but yeah, you're right. You find out where your limits are, and those are important, because if you don't know where your limits are, it can be really lethal in a downrange environment, obviously.
Yep.
So okay, so you wrap Ranger School. That sounds grueling, by the way, to do 5 instead of 2. It sounds like you got the both barrels of the Ranger School experience.
Yep.
And then what next? Where does that lead you to?
So then Airborne School, then went to Fort Carson. And when I was at Fort Carson, I was about to promote to captain, just because it was kind of weird coming from seminary as a chaplain candidate into active duty. So I was a first lieutenant through my training. That gave me a very shortened period of time at my first duty station. So quickly made the decision to try out for Special Forces. Part of it was knowing other Green Berets through Ranger School, thinking, man, these guys are really cool. man, these bat boys are really uptight. Or that refers to Ranger Battalion.
Yeah, I was gonna say break down the difference for people. So people
Okay.
see the word Ranger, there some people know it's like tab or scroll. But if you don't know what that means, maybe tell people what that means.
So Ranger can refer to two things. It can refer to the school or can refer to Ranger Regiment. Now, Ranger Regiment is an elite infantry unit. You have 3 Ranger battalions, and they are an elite infantry unit. Now, Special Forces are special. We do special missions. We work by, with, and through partner forces. The way we're structured and organized, there's 5 different Special Forces groups that focus on the different continental commands. They do so they can focus in different regions. So my region was Central and South America. That's why I had to learn Spanish. So unlike every other special operations unit, we have to learn the language of the people. And I mean, CA, SIAP, yes, they learn the language. But so with Rangers specifically, you have the unit. And to go to the unit as an officer, you have to be Ranger qualified. Now, Ranger School is the 2-month or longer school that you have to go to in order to be in Ranger Regiment if you are a sergeant and above, or if you are an officer. Now, you can go straight in as a Ranger enlisted to Ranger Regiment, and you go through RASP, or Ranger Assessment Selection Program, which they just beat the crap out of you. And then when you get to Ranger Regiment, you still suck because you don't have a Ranger tab. So you have to then go to Ranger School. And they're just an elite infantry unit. I mean, they do a lot of stuff with Delta, extremely talented, just meat-eating people. And it's just a very aggressive kind of, I think, atmosphere environment, very solid. I think I saw some funny meme about them getting up at 6 o'clock, working out, other things like that, working out again, and then SF sleeping until noon, drinking, hanging out, whatever. But we very much, in Special Forces, we work by, with, and through partner forces. So they're much more unilateral kind of action, and us is working with a partner force in order to be a force multiplier. So our main, since we're just kind of getting into it, Special Forces focuses on unconventional warfare, which are activities taken to coerce, disrupt, or overthrow an occupying power or government. And that's through using a resistance force. It's through using an underground government. So we would essentially infiltrate into another country, work with the resistance forces to whatever the occupying power or government are to overthrow them. We do it in 7 phases, and we'd focus on it specifically in that country. And that takes a lot of kind of specialized skills and training. That's our culminating exercise, actually. At the end of Special Forces qualification course, we have what's called Robin Sage, which is a maybe 3-4 weeks kind of total, but maybe you're in the state of North Carolina and you're pretending you're overthrowing or getting rid of Virginia or something like that. So working with resistance forces, it might just be like college students that come out, get paid for a little bit, get some training, running operations. And it's just, every 3 days they jump to another month and another month so you can get all the phases. But it's such great training. And they base everything that happens off of real life experiences, things that have happened to other Green Berets in different countries. So just amazing training.
Let me throw an experience I had. A buddy of mine was a SEER instructor for the Air Force, and they did a joint exercise with these guys. Some of them were SF, and some of them were Rangers. And so they set them out, and they laid out the course. They gave them the ground rules, whatever it was. You got to go from point A, you got to get to point B. You have a time limit. Not a lot of rules. Otherwise, sort of just solve the problem in the best way that makes sense to you, based on your training and your experience, and so on. And so my buddy, he said he looked at the map. He looked at who he's going after, and he was, assessed to go after the Ranger group. And there was a dozen of these guys, whatever, they were doing this thing. And I think it was like an Air Force versus Army game. They were playing back and forth. So they go to this thing. He looks at the map. He goes, okay, well, the absolute hardest way to get here would be through all of that garbage, brambles and briars and all this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to post up on the other end of it. And we're going to just catch them when they come sneaking out of the thing. Because they're going to go, well, that's the hardest way to get there. Nobody's going to go block it. Nobody will think it. But if you understand how Rangers think, then that's where you're going to be. So sure enough, those guys come out and they're cut and they're bleeding and they're all jacked up and, they're all destroyed. And then the guys who were looking for the SF guys basically started watching buses. Because the possibility of catching a civilian bus on the street was kind of the move that they came up with.
I like it. That's great. Yeah.
Just
awesome.
Thinking outside differently. One of them is, like you said, go through a brick wall for you. If you told them which wall, they'd ask you if there's another one behind it, so they know if they have to run faster, kind of thing. And then the other guys are looking like, hey, should we be, finding the guy who lays brick and maybe put some soft wall for us, or should we have somebody dismantle this wall before we get there, or some other kind of options? Just really thinking outside the box. So, and I've got a number of buddies. My last partner was a Green Beret in the FBI of all things, and the only reason I think, because like so many people that work in unconventional warfare, he probably would have been like piss off, I'm not going to get the shot. He just knew the Army wouldn't let him deploy, and he just that's all he wanted to do with his life. So interesting.
Yeah,
he did it voluntarily, and I think there were some people that did that. I don't have any hard feelings against those types, but curious as you were going through. So you've got this sort of like background, you've got this one side training, and then you pass through what, you go off to the Q course?
Yeah, so I get to 4th Infantry Division, Fort Carson, go to selection, 3 weeks, and not to spend too much time on training. So that's just kind of 3 weeks. You get about 35% out at the end of it. You get gate week, so ruck marches, runs, physical activities, IQ tests, personality tests. And then you have land nav, and then you have team week, carrying more weight than you thought possible. And I think we were eating like 4 or 5 MREs, a day, and still dropped like 20 pounds, something stupid like that. And it's pretty awful, but they're really just trying to assess you, not trying to necessarily play stupid games. So get through that, go to the qualification course. That's a couple of years. Already kind of went through, I guess, the more interesting training, which is Robin Sage. Also have to go through SEER, and obviously that's pretty intense stuff. That's survival, evasion, resistance, and escape for anyone who is not familiar, which they make pilot special operations folks, and anyone who has a higher likelihood of being caught behind enemy lines or having to survive, they make them go through that school. And get done with that and go to military freefall at the end of the qualification course, at the end of language. So 6 months of language training. And military freefall happened in March of 2020. Now, what else was happening then? COVID. So I wasn't that worried about this disease when I'm jumping out of planes at 14,000 feet. That was definitely kind of the more scary thing for me. But I get done with that. I go back to Fort Bragg. We're kind of being held a bit longer because we can't PCS or move to our duty stations immediately because of the different restrictions that the military is placing on service members, because we're not sure how deadly this disease is. So eventually get down to 7th Special Forces Group, June of 2020, and that's when all the fun begins.
Now, as you're going through some of this stuff, you just mentioned that really critical time frame in early 2020. You're a pretty sharp guy. You're looking at the world. You're focused on training, but some of the stuff that you're seeing externally, what were you thinking about what we were hearing? What were you assessing in real time as the information came in? Just kind of curious what your thoughts were, if you can put yourself back there.
I thought, what is it that we can actually help? Whether it's dangerous or not, what can we necessarily do? That there's certain things that are worse than death. And sure, maybe it's like a cold-like thing. China is obviously covering a lot of stuff up. I thought it was pretty wild when people were saying that it came from a bat or some kind of a weird thing in the forest. And we know that there's this lab, the Wuhan coronavirus lab, named after it, right? So that's pretty interesting to me. And it really hit home when I got back to Fort Bragg, and the church was closed down. The Bishop of Raleigh said no mass, no confession unless you're near death. And that was just insane. And to see everything else that was opened up, Home Depot, other stores, grocery stores, liquor stores, it's absolute insanity. And then to see other people being extremely nervous or worried about it. And I had some buddies who were kind of nervous because they said they were told that in their training, if they get COVID, if they drop 2 cycles, then they're out. So I can understand, okay, you're worried about getting sick. But they were still nervous if I went to mass or was around them. So it was just kind of this sort of insanity. And when I saw that religion was being slighted, that's when I thought there's something seriously wrong going on. And just trying to think through how effective could this mask be? How stupid is that kind of a mask thing? Who's actually getting sick right now? So I think the 2020 range, we kind of knew that older people, fat people, it's just like, sorry, you're not taking yourself, man. You're more susceptible. But if you're a young, healthy dude, you're probably going to be pretty okay. And to just shut down stuff and to shut down the churches, and that really pissed me off. I mean, I think one of the stories I was most frustrated with, as far as the Catholic side of the house, I usually prefer going to Latin Mass, but I go to both forms. I don't go to not to get, I don't go to the SSPX. That's just, my personal choice, but love the traditional Latin Mass. People who are not Catholic are like, what the heck are you talking about? So I'll try to break.
They know who they're following right now. So by listening to me, they've got a little taste of this stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So it was pretty wild that, so I was dating this chick. We were going to we usually go to Latin Mass, but because I'm flying out on a Sunday, we have to go Saturday night. Don't wear a mask going in, get chased down by ushers. And I have to ask the priest, hey, Father, what's the rule for masking? Okay. I noticed that you had this many candles on the altar and you didn't have a crucifix and this dude wasn't wearing a stole. So this kind of human made up BS rule, you're fine enforcing and chasing people down, but here's these religious rules that God, not directly, but through the church is essentially telling you, and you're kind of not following that. So what does that say? And actions speak louder than words. So it was just incredibly sad to see so many bishops fail us, so many priests kind of fail us. And great term, Father Nolan, WTF, where's the faith? You just have to ask, where's the faith? And it just wasn't there.
I had this moment very similarly, highly frustrated at that time. I was living outside of DC, so same part of the country, at least on the East Coast. And my wife was considering converting to Catholicism, having been raised with no religion at all. And I was born as a Catholic, and so it was nothing new to me, but we were coming back to the church in many ways. And I'm going to this church, and I found the most austere one that I could find, and it was a traditional cruciform build, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And they had a great cry room, which was really good. That was big because we had little kids. And we're going to this mass, and we're regularly showing up. And then suddenly the COVID strikes, and then they go, every other pew has to be blocked off. Only one family can be in the cry room at a time. And you can't self-assess your own risk. And they were essentially driving people away and turning people away at the doors that you couldn't come in. And the thing that hit me, and maybe this is because I was a Latin scholar when I was a kid, but I was very frustrated to think that the early Christians in Rome would have died rather than give up their mass. That was an option for them. It was like, would you like to show up? They would rather celebrate mass down with the pestilent corpses and the rotting sort of debris of dead people in the catacombs rather than give up what they were doing. And these people were scared of a cold, and they were wearing essentially a chain link fence to stop mosquitoes. Because anybody who's ever been through the sea burning and the chemical warfare understanding of what is out there, what these basic things mean. If you've ever done any biological warfare training, or if you've ever been around medics, you know what does and doesn't work and what people do and do not get sick from. And those masks were absurd. I mean, people were wearing bandanas, and you're like, oh, that doesn't work. Everything goes through that. Literally everything goes. If you can smell a fart through a pair of jeans, I know that you're going to be able to get a virus through the same thing. But what a strange time, right? I mean, we just saw people roll over and give up their faith, or give up their practice of their faith, if nothing else.
It was absolutely sad. And Catholic Church shouldn't be surprised when folks aren't coming back, if that's the example that the priests are given, bishops are given. I mean, one of the nice things is that the more Orthodox priests who do believe, their churches did grow, expand. We've seen more people going to Latin Mass, but not that that's the be all end all. Ultimately, it's, glorifying God, praise, reverence, serve him, by this means save your soul. I think that that's the better form to get it there, but you still can't be weird. You have to
That's it. Let me throw another thing at you. Think about this. Think about the recruiting tool that Special Forces is in the Army, or that BUDS is for the Navy, or whatever, to drag people who want to aspire to something higher, most of whom will fail percentage-wise. And then you think about what happened during the sort of COVID lockdowns, that more people chose to go to a more austere and traditional mass than the ones that were lackadaisical and had mask restrictions and were scared of each other and, were willing to shut things down and all that. And I think that is such an interesting little, just having the military background and having the faith background, that people are not looking what's the easiest thing in the world? Who's got the best coffee and the nicest narthex to go hang out and have donuts in? People are what's going to demand something of me? And how do I serve in that way? And how can I challenge myself as a human being? Because being a person is probably not enough for most of us.
It's the challenge piece, but it's also, I think, the relational piece, relationship with God. And when you're told that you can watch Mass online and that there's just kind of this blanket, I don't know what it was with the term of it, but just blanket permission for people to not go during this time. People yeah, people they miss God. They want to be with God. They want to worship him. And we're just drawn to two challenging things, but drawn to a personal relationship with him, which you experience more in a more reverent liturgy. That's how you experience the good, true, and beautiful, the transcendentals, God himself who became incarnate. So it's totally interesting. And yeah, it shows that making things easier for everybody is not necessarily good for society. And that can take us into so many things with technology, with comforts, I think liberals are liberals, a lot of it because they are just stuck in their universities and schools and have never had to do something difficult. And I think Anthony Esselin wrote some, great article or book kind of on it, or idea, where even in the 1930s, whatever, if you're trying to travel, good chance your car is breaking down. You have to go through some kind of adversity. And the more you're in touch with nature, the more you see kind of God's plan in nature. We believe through Romans 1 that God expresses himself through the created world, through created order, where we can understand him. And it's dealing with those hardships, but just seeing how common sense things work. And we're in a society right now where with basically, let's say you have a car, you can't put sand in the gas tank and think it's going to work. Yet that's what we're doing with our bodies, with our basic functions, with our sexualities. And it's just not good for us. So we need to get outside. We need to do a lot of those practices that the church told us to do, fasting regularly. Now we hear about intermittent fasting, how great it is. And it's like, well, maybe God knew something that you didn't. So
that's a really interesting point. Yeah, it's not exactly a new concept, and it was always a way to kind of experience the divine or to purify yourself. And then people do it for the same reason in a secular way, it seems like. So yeah, maybe there was something to this all along. Yeah. You have a very different presentation than a lot of guys. If anybody knows a lot of Green Berets, they're a mixed bag. They're an interesting group. Some are very reverent. I've got friends who are Mormon. I've got friends who are Catholic. I've got some that are totally just scumbags and are out there like running around and trying to slay chicks wherever they go in on every continent kind of thing. How did you fit into that kind of community of men and warriors?
I mean, you're not allowed to see my team chat. No, I mean, I love a spicy meme. I love good jokes that are just, off color, because it's funny, man. If it's funny, you have to say it. So I think, and I'll just be straight up about who I am, Catholic wise, whatever. Even as an infantry officer too, I think some guys were saying something, I was saying something else. I'm like, hey, don't get offended at what I say. I won't get offended at what you say, right? So if I'm talking about religion, we're talking about other things. So it was good. I mean, I love my team. It was just fantastic, and it was great. And I mean, this will get back into the story of sort of what was happening, but I got to 7th Group. And I get to my battalion, and my battalion is deployed. We were actually the last battalion to experience casualties during the Afghan war before the withdrawal. So battalion is deployed. The acting rear battalion commander is a transgender major. And this is an individual who, West Point gymnast, like as a Green Beret, as a captain, dude, children, I mean, pray for him, pray for the family. It's a difficult thing, but I was confronted with, what do I do about this experience? I'm still trying to
transition. I guess he socially transitioned. He just started dressing differently. Is that essentially what was going on?
So I never knew him before, but just kind of with, the hair, and just change of name. And yeah, I don't know all the physiology, but at any rate,
you didn't do the Crocodile Dundee check to make sure.
Swoop? No, nothing of that nature. But I'm just kind of confronted with, what do I do? So I actually called legal assistance to ask, when am I legally required to call this individual? And then she got back with me, this lawyer who, if you're listening to this, don't go to your JAG about problems. Your JAGs work for your commanders. Go to legal assistance, let them help you. So I went to legal assistance, and she got back with me like a week later and said, hey, I reached out, got to the level of the Pentagon. I'm like, whoa. So this is obviously some kind of touchy thing, and asked, do you know this person's going to be commander? I'm not sure. Was told, you can call that person by rank and last name. That goes in accordance with this Army regulation. However, the individual will probably know what you're doing, and just be careful to not say anything negative, behind this person's back or whatever, if that comes up. And so I just did, yes, Major such and such, no, Major such and such, how are you, Major such and such? It was very awkward in conversations with other people about him, because it's like, yes, I was talking to Major such and such said to move Major such and such things, but that's the game I tried to do. And that actually put me for sure in the company I went into, because he ended up taking Alpha. I went to Bravo. I mean, it's kind of a mess. Like the sergeant majors were supposed to go to different companies too, because they were having trouble finding which sergeant major would work with him. And the one I got, who I ended up not really getting along with super well, was not really willing to work with this individual either. But that got me to my team, which was great. Very mixed bag personalities. Like SF dudes are a lot more libertarian. You got some Christian there, but they'd probably politically be a libertarian, but just leave me alone, do whatever you want to do, morally, whatever. And just got kind of an FU attitude from the team sergeant about shots. My warrant officer, super conservative dude, pretty fun. Yeah, so it was just good. So, I mean, we just get to that point, and I knew that they didn't get along with their last captain. So I made it a point to really work on that kind of building rapport with them. So just kind of wrote out, just sent whatever memes out there, had fun. And yeah, that kind of brought us to where the whole COVID thing was happening, where we knew a shot was coming out. One of the first things I knew is that it used aborted fetal cells. And as a Catholic, I was under the understanding that that is remote material cooperation. So I cannot participate in that moral act unless there's a grave reason for it. Now, my understanding continued to kind of develop as I went on to looking at what is abortion, how involved is it? And I thought, because it's a baby that was killed in the 70s, which is the human embryo kidney 273, that is kind of what these shots were derived from. So we're now in like early 2021, shot is out. I see that I'm the only officer who did not sign up to get it immediately, because they were asking for people to sign up. And I'm like, oh crap, this is going to be interesting.
Right.
I tell my team that as your senior rater, which is the person who can approve or kind of rank the guys, that I'm not going to punish or reward them. I personally don't want to, at least until it's mandatory. We just kind of go on. So I just continued to learn more about it, and kind of came to the realization that it's not just the sin of murder, but it's also just murder, and also the theft and continued theft of the unborn child's body. And we have no right to that baby's body parts. Whenever a service member dies overseas, we should do everything we can to bring their body back, to inter it, and to properly dispose of the body, because the body is something sacred. So similarly with these products from human embryo kidney 273, and what does that imply? That implies there were over 200 attempts to get children, to harvest children at the point when a kidney was developed. It's just barbaric, the practices that they take. And we've seen Planned Parenthood videos where they're selling body parts, and it's absolutely demonic. And we need to understand that politics isn't just being nice, it's also a good versus evil. And I'm not saying that Republicans are all good, but there is at least kind of like a breachhead into it where, you know, if rhinos just stuck to the dang principles, we might be on that point, but just kind of continuing to cave. So just got to that point. Team was getting harassed. Team sergeant, he got it pretty bad from the sergeant major the whole time. For me, it was just kind of career. A lot of people don't understand the pressure before the mandate came out. That was the worst time for me. That was the most stressed I think I'd been in most of my life. And maybe may have had an easy life. I don't know. But it's...
What did that look like though? I mean, what was the implement that you were feeling that stress? How did you discern it?
It was trying to make decisions for the team too, and understanding that the team isn't going to get the same missions, or we're being slighted. So it's feeling bad for the guys, feeling bad for the team sergeant. He's getting brought in 2-3 times a week, getting yelled at by the sergeant major for like an hour. I was, got yelled at by him once, whatever. I just like wrote everything down like a good officer, memorandum for record form, boom. I'll bring that out if needed. But it's like, you're screwing up your career. You should look for work outside the Army. You're not going to recover this from this reputation wise. I'm going to kick guys out of the company. I'm going to put them in unwanted assignments. I'm going to send them back to the schoolhouse to teach. That's not a threat. That's a promise if you lose a mission for this. And it was put in
that you're not going to fit in if you're not going to conform.
Right. And that's one of the issues with the military, that it is kind of a ladder climbing process. And right now, when there's not wars or things that are extremely necessary to get done, it's what do you need to do to conform to continue to climb the ladder? And there's a whole lot of saying the right things or doing the right things and getting the right timeline. And it's a hierarchy that's necessary. It's a competence hierarchy, but there's things that we need to change about it to kind of get rid of some of this yes men attitude. And we've seen how the yes men attitude's been ingrained, how morality hasn't been, especially with regards to how this shot was implemented. because I mean, before the mandate came out, I was looking into, how do I apply for religious exemption? How do I apply for medical exemption? I couldn't do it. That's the thing. There's just no protection. They're just making whatever policies they want to try to coerce people to do it to the extent that they can. And it wasn't as bad for me as others. I heard at Fort Bragg, for instance, there was a battalion sergeant major who, in front of a formation, told the soldiers, for those of you who've gotten the vaccine, you can go over there. You guys have the day off. If not, put your rucksack on. We're going through for a grueling ruck march. And that is absolute coercion, punishment. You can't do that. So for officers, it's much more kind of career bound, where I would have to quarantine for longer for not having the shot versus someone who is vaccinated for a week, or different masking requirements, but mostly just that you're identified as different. And it ultimately came down to, our team had a JSET, which is a joint combined exercise training, a 6-week trip to a foreign country to do training. And this is extremely important to get these trips. As an officer, you have maybe 18 months, 24 months as a team leader to really make your mark and move on forward. And as an officer, that's it. Unless you go Delta, which, sorry, that's not me, man. I mean, some crazy dudes, hats off to you. That's it as far as like deployments, that kind of experience. Then you're going to be a company commander next, maybe, where you're expected to manage 6 teams. And if you haven't had a trip overseas, how are you going to oversee the management of those teams if you don't fully understand the capabilities of a detachment? And the 1st Special Forces Command made it a policy decision where you needed to have the shot in order to deploy. And I mean, before that, even other team leaders started briefing when they went to brief the SOC South, Special Operation Command South. This is our baseball card. Here's all the guys we have, and we have this many people vaccinated. They're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, please keep saying that. So it's other team leaders doing that to get ahead. That's kind of the cutthroat nature of, we're still very competitive, but we're doing it in order to excel in our careers. So that's kind of what it looked like. And with this requirement, we're out doing military freefall training, Arizona, and this policy comes down, and talked to the company commander, and he said, hey, John, I know your team doesn't want to get the shot, but what's it going to be? Is your team going to get the shot, or are we going to take this mission from you? And I had talked to the guys ahead already, and I said, hey, sir, I only have one guy who's willing to get it, so I guess you have to take the mission from us. He's like, oh, okay. I think you're surprised about that. And then I asked, unless you're willing to accept natural immunity, which he said, no, we're not willing to accept that risk, which threw me off, really pissed me off, because we're jumping out of planes at 14,000 feet with the oxygen equipment. So what risk are you accepting?
Well, think about this, though. Were you surprised by how few people were willing to stand up and say, no, this isn't for me? Because it's kind of a contrarian type of group. You talked about libertarians leaving the hell alone. That is my experience with most operators. It's like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do because it's hard, and because I can, and because you can't make me.
That was extremely frustrating with Special Forces, because if our main mission is unconventional warfare, which does employ psychological operations and understands how messaging works within foreign countries, within trying to overthrow governments, that I thought they would be able to see through this bullshit. And my team sergeant, I mean, I love Rob Green. So you were saying Catholic of the Year. He excels way, way ahead of me. 7 kids, wrote the book, still on active duty, just amazing man. And, here I am, perpetual single dude, whatever. But
you got time.
Working on it. Any ladies watching your show? No, I'll be right. So at any rate, where was I going with that? No, sorry. Totally.
Yeah, just the fact that people didn't want to.
Yeah.
My team. This is the group of people that looks through things and goes, yeah, we're the ones who do PSYOP, or we have PSYOPs come with us, and
right.
We put stuff down. We don't fall for that crap.
It threw me off. It really pissed me off because, my team sergeant, he said, this is the only thing they've really made me try to do. Like, said, no, there's no other way around it. Usually you get an order, you see if it makes sense. If not, you ask, why are we doing this? Should we do this? Yeah, you're trying to look into all those things. We're selected for it.
Mm-hmm. And there's almost always a waiver. I've never heard it. Like, this was the weirdest thing. The federal government did the same thing. So I was in the same boat. And what I knew was, and maybe you can kind of reflect on this for the audience, I always expected the civil service would stand up first for those of us that were out there that were going to do it, because we weren't facing, necessarily legal action, in which case we were not going to get a negative discharge that would possibly ruin the rest of our life. We weren't going to do any jail time on a base, which is a real possibility for disobeying an order. Maybe you can kind of talk about some of the consequences that people, maybe military wide, but also in your particular area, were facing.
So before that, it was before the mandate went out. It was just having missions taken from you, not being able to go TDY or travel, maybe having to mask when other people aren't able to. There's many who had it much worse than I did. So Brianna Cespedes, for instance, she was Air Force, kicked out, got a general discharge, but she was quarantined for like 140 days in the course of like 2 years. It's absolute insanity. And this is, a young 24, 25-year-old girl. So for me, when you get to, let's say, the mandate coming out, I put my religious exemption in. There's the possibility I get kicked out with a general discharge, which happened to the majority of people who were kicked out. They got general discharges. This means that they don't have their GI Bill, that their labeling is having conducted a serious offense, so misconduct for serious offense. And this goes out whenever they make a job application, that they don't get even certain discounts, like for crews, joining the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, different clubs. It affects your employment. It affects your life. You can't go to school. I mean, and it also is just kind of an affront to your character. Hey, your service, it wasn't honorable. You did something wrong. So that's something that I faced. I also I got out because I couldn't recover my career. I was ironically accepted to teach philosophy and ethics at West Point, but I couldn't move or PCS to go to grad school because once the mandate went out, I couldn't travel. I couldn't move to a different duty station. I couldn't deploy. And if you're a Green Beret who can't deploy, you're not very useful. So these are kind of the consequences that were faced. And then I'm very grateful for my leadership. I know I complained about, one guy a little bit, but my battalion commanders, I mean, they really hooked me up. It was good chatting with them. I mean, not trying to get Stockholm syndrome. I wish everyone stood up to a greater extent, but still tried to set me up career-wise to where I could still survive if I wanted to just stay within group. So for most people, if there's any kind of angst or any kind of want to get people to conform and seeing these anti-vaxxers or people who are refusing to get the shot as a problem, it'd be very easy to write your officer evaluation report in such a way to kind of stop your career. And my career was just put on ice the entire time that the mandate was in effect before it was rescinded. So that's kind of the consequences that I generally faced. Others obviously, had it worse, were actually kicked out. And with the Army, I think their plan was just to ice us out and to avoid lawsuits. There's so many aspects of this whole thing, and we're not going to get into all of them, but I think that the leaders knew what they were doing was wrong, and they put out certain statements that make us understand that, because they try to explain how the Pfizer shot, which is EUA approved, is medically interchangeable with Comirnaty, which says nothing about the legality of that, because that's another thing. So we're getting back to summer of 2021, August. My team on that one shot is FDA approved, the other is not, and the FDA approved shot is not available. SecDef said he's ordering us to take an FDA approved shot. If there's none available, you can fulfill it with an EUA. Well, if there's no FDA approved shot, that makes the order illegal. I already made my mind up to get a religious exemption, so not as big a deal. But when we got counseled, and we actually got counseled in the middle of the woods, it's absolute insanity. We're doing a 2-week training exercise in Louisiana. It's the Joint Readiness Training Center, and as Green Berets, we're behind enemy lines, out in the woods. You have like a 12-hour break. During that 12-hour break, they send a major out to counsel us.
What?
And I just had, yeah.
How did that go over?
The guys were not very happy. They definitely gave that major a piece of their mind. I called my company commander and I said, "Hey, sir, why are my guys getting counseled in the middle of the woods? How do you expect them to make a lifelong career to resources? How am I supposed to show guys that training to fight and win wars is more important than administrative bullshit when this is happening, and that we're just not going to get training value if this is holding over our heads?" So I had that conversation, and a little bit later heard that we could wait until we got back to 7th Group in order to get the counselings in, which frustrated me more because it means that someone else could have made that call instead of the captain in the woods. But yeah, it was very, very frustrating. I don't think I'd been much angry in my life. So yeah, we get back and then we just have a conversation with the doctors about medical exemption. That's another thing. The military broke their own medical policy. So why did we send this letter? I mean, let's tie it back into the Declaration of Military Accountability, because military leaders broke the law. They didn't follow their own policy. They coerced us into taking an experimental drug that was not FDA approved without giving us full knowledge of what was going on. You have to disclose what you're giving to the person. You have to disclose that you have an option to receive it or not. It's a Nuremberg violation. During one of my counselings out, I asked the full bird colonel, have you heard of the Nuremberg Code? It's a Nuremberg violation to force someone to take something that they don't know the side effects for, to force them in any way, shape, or form.
Informed consent is required.
Yeah.
I think you cited that. I cited the same thing to the Deputy Assistant Director of Human Resources over at the FBI, and it went over about as well as you'd imagine too. I also may have implied that he did what the Nazis did and that he might as well call himself a good American, which is also, you know, when you're a civilian, you can get away with saying a little bit more stuff, which I chose to do.
Well, I sent it anyway. I asked, do you think this was legal order? Do you realize that this was to the full bird colonel? You're required to do it when you're getting out if you're an officer. So it's like, do you think it was legal order? Realize it requires an FDA approved drug to be legal. Are you doing anything to track COVID injuries? Have you heard of Nuremberg Code? So that kind of spiced it up. He asked me, he said too much ideology is bad and asked if I heard of the Crusades, and said I was going to a dark place and asked if I believed in selfless service and implied that what I did wasn't selfless. So I don't know. It's but no, sorry. You're going to, what happened with your human resource thing?
They put me on AWOL, which I didn't know was a thing. There's actually an AWOL ability to be when you're a federal employee, which I did not know. I knew about it from the military, but I'd never heard of that happening. So I literally was on approved leave, and I showed up to a qualification because I carried a firearm still, and I show up at a firearms qual. Actually, at White Sands Missile Range of all places. If you've ever been there, it's a huge dirt patch in the middle of nowhere. I was on Small Arms Range number 4, which is like 400 yards long, about 100 yards wide, of just dirt in the middle with a mountain in the background, and there's nobody for for miles. And I went out there and shot with like 12 other people from my squad. And then they called me up that night and they said, hey, did you have a COVID-19 test? And I said, no, I was on leave. And also I was in the desert in the middle of and I was on leave. And I drove my personal vehicle and I shot my personal weapons. And I was just qualifying because I still carry a gun. And they go, oh, well, now you're on AWOL. Your leave has been revoked unless you qualify. Yeah. And my fight was this. I obviously wasn't going to get the shot either. And I did that up front. But the fun thing for me is they said they gave me an alternative. The alternative was compliance by taking the emergency use authorization test every 72 hours. Now, my answer to them was pretty straightforward. And you might find this very amusing. I said, look, I've been a paramedic for over a decade. I have a top secret clearance with an SCI qualification. And, I've done the polygraphs. So if you can't trust me to stay at home with the 240 hours of sick leave when I have the sniffles, I don't know what to do. But I'm not going to take a test when I have no symptoms. Because I know medically and professionally that's never been done before. We don't take prophylactic nasal swabs, particularly with something, because there's things like ethylene oxide. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons why you don't do it. I know guys that have nosebleeds now every day because they did it all the time for travel. And it's like, no, I'm not doing that. You're crazy. And you won't lose the job over it. That's the other funny thing. Like someone's got to draw a line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was not as aware of all the scientific things. For me, it's like these shots, dead babies. I'm not trying to, be involved. Murder and theft of baby. So I didn't necessarily put up the fight for the nasal swab. So I got the brain scrape every now and then.
Every 72 hours?
No. I mean, so here's the nice thing is that being in SF, things were stupid, but it was more of a career kind of risk. Guys weren't like treating me differently, weren't necessarily, I mean, did they have masking rules? Sure. Did anyone follow them? No, absolutely not. And similar with testing too. I think I talked to one doctor and he's like, yeah, man, if it comes to that, I'm just going to ask you if you have symptoms and you say, no, you're good. All right, solid. So you can still get around a lot of this kind of stupid stuff, but still we have a sign that says diversity is our readiness, equal opportunity is our combat multiplier, something like that. So, wokeness, it's infiltrating, 7th group logo at the bottom. The whole thing was so dumb. Yeah.
And what does that do to military readiness from what you saw?
Well, it results in a lot of not so happy command climate surveys when your boss is a transgender major or someone with psychological issues. There's not a whole lot of faith and confidence that if the person doesn't know, what's between their legs, that they're going to make the right combat decisions. So it definitely hurts morale. And I know we were nervous about women coming into special forces as well. I got through IBOLC before women were in the infantry. Some women were in Ranger School too. But we need to focus on competence. Like seriously, it just needs to be a competence focused thing. And I don't think that most Americans are that racist. I think we just kind of got over it. That we got through the 90s. We have great jokes. People like Dave Chappelle's hilarious. Other folks are hilarious. We make fun of each other, whatever. We move forward and you just get along. Like I got along with everybody. Like it doesn't, who freaking cares? Just get your shit done. Get your job done. Stop focusing on it. Stop talking about it. It doesn't help. And I hate too, we had Sergeant Major of SOCOM comes to 7th Group and it says, yeah, this is a great unit. They are totally diverse and they don't sacrifice anything. It's like, yeah, we have a lot of Hispanics because we speak Spanish. Like that's it. Like, come on, man. Like, Tomate. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. So it's just really stupid. We need to focus on things that actually matter instead of all this kind of nonsense bullshit. I mean, that reminds me too. Yeah, SecDef, he was AWOL, sick, whatever it is, in the hospital, didn't show up. My fear for this right now is that congressmen are going to pinpoint and focus in on him not being around for 4 days, just like they can pinpoint and focus in on the few transgenders in the military or on some bases having drag shows, which these are terrible, terrible things. But the larger readiness issue is kicking out all these guys for the shot. So yes, I'd say bring it up, but don't lose sight of all the wrong things that SecDef has done. Don't go try to impeach him for this. Let's go ahead and focus on the Afghan war. Let's focus on the worst recruiting we've had since Vietnam. It's just absolutely atrocious. And at some point, if you're looking at the patterns, you have to really think that the Biden administration isn't just doing it incompetently, that they are actually out there to destroy America, to cause certain emergencies and problems, and to fix them with other problems that are going to continue to consolidate power for themselves and for, global elites.
So you said you're 35, is that right?
Yes.
And you're fit, you're still capable. You got kicked out, mid-career, or you chose to leave, but they gave you a decision for all your chips and you made the one you made. Young guys still probably got to look to you and see what's on your wall and know your background and say, hey, man, should I join the military? I'm 17, I'm 18, I'm 19 years old. I'm full of piss and vinegar. I want to go, kill people and not go to jail for it. What do you think? Is this the career for me? Can you recommend it to people?
Yeah, so this is what I've actually told some folks, and I have people reach out. They're welcome to. They can find me on the website, whatever. What I tell people is that we're made to, and it's very Ignatian, just off of the summer retreat, is that we're made to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save our soul. And everything is a means to that end. And if you think that military service is something that you want to do, something you'll enjoy, and will help further you as a person, then it's something you should consider. However, you need to understand and know that you're going to go through some challenges that you shouldn't have to in the military. But life isn't about avoiding those challenges. It's about doing the right thing no matter what, in whatever situation. So know yourself and understand what those challenges are going to be and have those limits. We can't just avoid certain areas, and we can't give up the military as an institution to be another 3-letter institution to be co-opted by the left. We already got enough feds trying to shit. I think we just had a holiday for it. They're trying to co-opt Epiphany. Sorry, Epiphany wins. It's there forever. But
turns out.
Yeah. So I would still encourage a person to consider it. Now, if there's something that is morally objectionable to you, period, that's a requirement. So if the COVID shot were around, I'd say don't join at all until this is gone. If you can also wait until Biden is not president, that would be even better, because there's some concern about how these leaders are going to take care of service members, because they aren't. They don't care. It just shows that they don't care. That there's been whistleblower reports that the injuries that the vaccine injuries, I'm not a doctor, so don't focus on it too much, but there are people who've been seriously messed up by this. And we hear in special forces about somebody who dives in the combat dive qualification course, where you have to be extremely fit to go there, or a maritime assessment course, which is a prereq for dive school. It makes you question, it makes you guess, and there needs to be full accountability investigations into that. So since getting out of the military in July, as far as pursuit, I've kind of felt that God's really providentially put me in this position, because I get out in July 1, I do an 8-day Ignatian retreat, July 12th through 20th. So for people who don't know what that means, that is a 8-day of silence. You pray 5 holy hours a day. So you're sitting in a chapel or somewhere, meditating on some aspect of scripture, spending half hour to an hour talking to a priest. And he's helping you to review your prayer for the day. You're offering up decisions to God. And I went there wondering, you know what, God? I spent time in seminary. I still love you. I still want to serve you. What do you want from me? Do you want me to go back to seminary? What do you want me to be involved in? So trying to offer that up to him. And then on the feast day of St. Ignatius, which is July 31st, is when my first op-ed was published. And that led to getting a lot of interviews. So now nearly 40 interviews, and then going up to DC and trying to work with different congressmen. That's kind of been just kind of this mission that I've seen God put me in. Now, I don't want to be a perpetual unemployed dude that just does this, like trying to find my place in life. But I do think that fighting for my country is certainly something God's called me to do. But working with Congress, it's been such a pain, because the two things that I've been trying to get done, and this is why we have this letter go out, trying to get amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the annual budget that allows the military to continue funding. And that's where you would be able to put in things such as bringing service members back in, elevating their discharge statuses to honorable, giving them back pay, giving them time allotted for time they've been out of the service. These things weren't done. They just weren't done. This last NDAA was absolute trash. Republicans are not if they negotiate like Democrats, we'd get a whole lot more done. And it's extremely frustrating. And it seems like they're more concerned about staying in power than they are about getting shit done. Santos, you might think like, okay, weird stuff, whatever. I don't know, man. Wasn't convicted yet. And that's an extra vote we have. So let's hang on to him. And hey, McCarthy, if you're going to vote to get out of him, maybe you don't quit. Like we're shrinking the majority here. So it's just absolute. I think a lot of these folks don't realize it's a good versus evil, or that civilizations don't last forever. So I'm going on so many tangents, but so amendments is one piece, and then hearings is another. So I've been trying to push for congressional hearings, House Armed Service Committee, COVID Select, weaponization of the federal government. And these stories need to be heard. Mine, very mild. A lot of people had it way worse, but read Rob Greene's book. Amazing. Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. Check out the website too, which is militaryaccountability.com. That has links for the book. That has our declaration as well. It has a petition people can sign. But educating yourself on what happened in the military just shows how much accountability is needed. That people broke the law. They committed wrongs. There's not going to be trust until people are held accountable. And we wrote the Declaration of Military Accountability because I've gone up to DC a couple times. I've been talking to so many different staffers. We haven't even gotten a regional hearing. I think there was maybe last spring some hearing with the MilPers or something. I don't know what happened to that. I don't want to hear SecDef getting yelled at about trainees in the military again. I want to hear him yelled at about the freaking Afghan withdrawal. I want to hear him yelled at about kicking out 8,000 dudes. Did he know? He did know, but let's talk about it. The FDA EUA distinction. What kind of information did he have about people being injured from this shot? What did he know about the religious exemption process being blatantly denied? And what kind of coercive measures was he telling his generals to employ in order to, the FDA approved shot's called Comirnaty. It might as well be called conformity, because that's all they were worried about, is just getting people to conform.
Yep.
So anyway.
I'm behind all of those ideas. I'd like to see that done for the civilian service as well. I think the military probably had a much rougher go of it, which is why we haven't heard so much about it until now. Let's talk about the declaration. We'll wrap it up with this. The Declaration for Military Accountability. What was it modeled on? What was the purpose of it? What are you guys demanding out of this particular document, and where can people support it?
So Rob Greene is the one who wrote it. So he is an active duty 05, father of 7, Catholic, solid dude. So he's the one who drafted it, and there were a lot of people who put input into it. I didn't put as much input, but was involved in kind of earlier process or known about it. So had 231 of us sign it, and it basically says that this government, it doesn't work without immoral people, and that these military leaders broke the law and they need to be held accountable for it. And here, service members are still suffering from it. The homeless vet population, people dying from the shot, people with debilitating vaccine injuries, people with financial burdens that are screwing up their life. And they've had 2 years to correct themselves, and it doesn't really get into Congress, but that's part of it, is we've tried to work through our elected officials and they failed us. So we're going to get accountability ourselves. So it comes with some pretty strong promises. People might think, really, it's not that bad. If you look at all the wrongs that these leaders committed, taking their retirement pay away is not bad. Bringing them back off of retirement in order to put them through a court-martial. Hey, if you did nothing wrong, you have nothing to worry about. And we are all about accountability. If we are wrong for some reason, which we're not, but if we're wrong for some reason and you're innocent, that's great. And this isn't about, let's just fire everybody who did it wrong, because unfortunately, if this were a test, the whole military failed. As much as I'm upset with the top leaders, I'm upset with these middle level managers too, who needed to just do the right thing. And if we were in a Nazi Germany situation, we'd have a bunch of Nazis, unfortunately. It's very sad. So we have these folks who signed. We have about 7 folks who are running for office, others who are interested in that. We have people who are still on active duty who signed it, who are doing that at great, great risk to themselves to sign it while on active duty. And it's just saying that we're going to do what we can responsibly within moral means and legal means. So not calling for violence whatsoever. And it's not even a partisan document. I'm talking partisanly because liberals are retarded and Republicans are pretty bad too, but not quite as bad, at least in principle, but a lot of weak spines and shit like that. Yeah. But this document is not. It is in accordance with the Constitution and Rob Greene being Catholic, in accordance with the natural law. So drawing off of those principles in order to kind of push forward and motivate ourselves. So if you want to support us, go to militaryaccountability.com. You can sign the petition. We've had a lot of problems with the website because we've had people hacking it, trying to disrupt it, and it's just absolute insanity. If you post it on Facebook or Instagram, it gets taken off. It's hilarious. You can't DM people with that website name. So those are things you can do specifically with that. But I'll bring it back to, why does our country suck? Who's at fault for it? You and I we're at fault for it. This is a country of we the people, for the people, by the people. And if that's the case, if you're ignorant about the laws and how the government is governed, you need to be spun up on it. If you are just kind of, I'm not saying everybody needs to be a news junkie, but there's a certain level of ownership and awareness of a thing that you participate in order to keep it going. So yes, sign the document, but do more. And the way you figure out what you do more, I think, is through prayer and discernment. And if you want to help yourself too, be Catholic, because that's ultimately what you need to do to get to heaven. But I'll just throw that one out there. People can get pissed off, whatever. I'll have a religious debate later.
Yeah, we'll hear about that in the comments. That's good. It's true though, that what we tolerate, right? The things that we tolerate is what we're complicit in, it turns out. And yes. a lot of people gave up an awful lot of ground in the last couple of years. I've been telling people, you got to fight your way back up to that line of the sand. Most of us are behind it for whatever reason. Good, bad, or indifferent. Do an honest assessment of where your ground is. You're probably not where you wanted to be. You need to get up in front of it and then plant your feet and get ready to start taking rounds, because it's still coming at us. It's not stopping. We're about to see, I think, just another really, really interesting year of some awful behavior, probably on both sides, if I had to guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that everybody's New Year's resolution has to respond to the current crisis that happens well. You might not plan for it, but go ahead and throw that in your resolutions, because it's going to be a wild year. And know what your limits are, know what you're willing to stand for beforehand, or you fall for anything.
I love it. All right. So other than single ladies who are looking to lock you down, what are the best ways people can follow you and support what you're up to?
My website is johnfrankman.com. And so before you follow me on social media too, I would urge you follow Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and life. That is the means to salvation. But if after you follow him, you still want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Johnny_Franks. So yeah, those are ways to support and really appreciate it, but definitely militaryaccountability.com. And I'm an individual, and we're made up of a lot of individuals who are doing this fight. And it's, I can't do anything on my own. My motto through this whole thing has been Luke 17:7-10. And that's where Jesus talks about the owner sends his servants out into the field. And when they come back, Jesus says that the master isn't like, hey, come on, let me serve you food. No, the master is like, come serve me. And when you're done serving me, you can serve yourself something. And at the end of it, the servants say, we are unworthy servants who've only done our duty. So we're just trying to do our duty, but that's just what we need to do to get this crap done.
I can take it. I appreciate you spending the time with us. We'll have some more people on with some different stories. I think all these will tell a broader picture, kind of a mosaic of experiences through this whole COVID sort of tyranny that went on in the military. But Johnny, and it's Johnny with one N, correct? That's what I think.
Yeah. It's kind of, it was bold, but I don't know. Yep. Johnny with one N.
Johnny with one N. All right, brother. Thanks so much for giving me the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that is today's Kyle Seraphin Show. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you appreciated that conversation. I hope you learned something new. I hope you have a renewed sense of purpose, if such a thing can happen, on this Thursday, Winnie the Pooh Day. What a weird day, January the 18th. I want to say a wrap up thanks to my buddies over at 4Patriots. They are the ones that sponsored this program. There it is. You guys can go to their website at the number 4patriots with an s.com/Kyle. Again, 4patriots.com/Kyle. If you want to follow them on Twitter, where I spend a lot of time, you can follow them at 4Patriots with an S, LLC at the end of it. Someone stole the other handle. And you guys can use promo code Kyle on their website for any number of these things out here. You're seeing the Patriot Power Generator. Probably a good idea when things are cold. When you are looking at maybe losing power like the O'Boyle family sweatshop, will they be able to run a heat press and allow him to continue to press shirts? I don't know, but it's definitely worth a try. You guys should check out 4patriots.com/Kyle. They've got the ultimate jumbo chicken survival food kit. Ooh, there's a lot of things in there. There's a lot of sandwiches going on. 168 total servings. Guys, if you're not figuring out how to feed yourself in an emergency, then you are part of the liabilities out there. Don't be a liability. Be a patriot who believes in self-reliance, and check out 4patriots.com/Kyle so you guys can get a deal on any of the number of things out there so you can be prepared for any pending emergency and not be part of the problem. You can be part of the solution. That's a very American way to be. And moreover, let's just finish it up here. My buddy Garrett O'Boyle's merch shop. This is the O'Boyle family sweatshop. You guys know how to get there. You just go to the-suspendables.com. Just remember, to be a suspendable, you have to go to the-suspendables.com. That's not true. You just have to do the right thing. But you can go to a merch store if you want to get some Ranger panties and you want to freeze your butt off. That's an option. The PT shirts are fantastic. They're probably my favorite right now. And then the second most favorite I have is the Last Line Substack shirts. They have the AR-15 that you're seeing at the top there in multiple colors, and it has a quill coming out of the end of the barrel, reminding us that the pen is mightier than the sword, except those times when the sword must be mightier than the pen. It's probably cold. You might want to look into one of our sweaters. Those hoodies there are super nice. They're real comfy. Do they look like Green Arrow? Kind of. They've got the Suspendables badge on them. Check out the-suspendables.com. Keep the O'Boyle family sweatshop moving. Keep those kids chained to their desks where they are working diligently and learning about American commerce the way that people used to, working by candlelight. I don't know. Something like that. We appreciate you guys supporting us and supporting the O'Boyle family with this thing and the merch. When we see it, I'm going to start seeing it out in public places, and then I'm going to start freaking out just a little bit. But you guys want to be one of those people that's an early adopter? This is how you do it, the-suspendables.com. All right, that's enough. How about a 5-star review as we go out into the next end of this week here and going into the Friendly Friday? This is our 5-star review. It says, it's from Check Privacy Disclosure. That's my new favorite handle. I don't know what that means. I like it. It just says, thank you. 5 stars. Thank you for putting it all on the line to take a stand. Too many people are focused on securing their comfort instead of doing what's right. We all owe a debt of gratitude to the Suspendables for being true patriots. A very kind statement. I think there are many people out there that are willing to put their personal comforts aside. That's what our founding fathers did. That's a real American position. Put your comfort aside. Go out there and do the right thing. Be a good person. Go meet your neighbors. You know what to do. Maybe you're being called to join the military. We'll see. All of you guys, be safe. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.